In a few weeks, Jaguar will present the most important model in its history, as the brand has done what no other car manufacturer has dared to attempt, voluntarily stopping the sale of all its cars at once for almost 2 years. 0 models available to order and almost 0 revenue, just to wipe the slate clean and be reborn in a different way. And we're not talking about just any brand, we're talking about Jaguar. 104 years of history, absolute icons, a Le Mans legend, a name that for a long time meant English elegance, luxury and speed. But that was before. 2 years ago, Jaguar chose to start over, ending combustion engines, abandoning old methods, and saying goodbye to its historic clientele. The idea was to come back only with electric cars, at least twice as expensive, to go after Bentley and Porsche. A double or nothing gamble with no safety net and nothing to offer for almost 2 years. And to launch this new era, they unveiled the Type 00 concept with the Copy Nothing campaign. A video without a single car, models with a weird look, neon pink everywhere and the whole world making fun of it. When Jaguar released that, we all thought there were probably better things to do. It actually caused a worldwide outcry and rude awakening internally, to the point that Jerry McGovern, the head of design, was let go after 22 years with the company. Today, the real car, the Type 001, is starting to leak to the press, and still isn't convincing anyone. So it's simple. Either their gamble works, or it's the outright end of Jaguar after 104 years of history. Except that I am convinced there was another way, and that Jaguar's real mistake isn't the one everyone thinks. So, since I was a car designer, work in the Jaguar Land Rover group and own a Jaguar you may have already seen in a video, people often ask me what I would have done in Jaguar's place. On this channel, I explain design, but always refuse to redesign newly released cars. Because I know from experience how complicated the job is and how easy it is to come in afterward without dealing with the heavy constraints of the industry. But this time, it's going to be different. This isn't about criticizing a design, but imagining something new for a brand I love as it struggles to survive. Honestly, I've thought about this for 2 years. In this video, I'll share the detailed plan I would use to relaunch Jaguar, including for the first time my vision, my sketches, and another version of what they could have released. But to get to the heart of the matter and really understand Jaguar's problem, we have to go back a few years and put ourselves in the shoes of a brand that was simply collapsing. When I was a child, a Jaguar was something people dreamed about. Sure, the brand always had a reputation for variable reliability, and the S-Type always looked a bit strange. But since World War II, it still lit up the industry with cars that were both beautiful and high-performing. This brand, created by Sir William Lyons, perfectly represented the British automotive style that combined power and elegance, at a time when Rolls and Bentley were in the background. In terms of sales, it peaked at 180,000 cars in the 2017 to 2018 period, which was its all-time record. Well, during the same period, Mercedes, BMW and Audi each sold around 2 million cars, more than 10 times what Jaguar did. And that was the best year in Jaguar's history. But that's not the worst part. In 2022, sales had dropped back down to around 60,000 units, which is a decrease of about 67% in 4 years. And it only got worse. In the last fiscal year before its rebranding, Jaguar sold only 48,000 cars worldwide, which is another 27% drop. For a brand that has always compared itself to the Germans, that's niche volume, not global premium manufacturer numbers. Locally, it's even more obvious. In 2023, Alpine, with only one model, sold 2,700 cars in France, while Jaguar, with 6 models in its lineup, registered barely 1,000 there. They have an entire range that sells less than a single model brand. That's exactly what I call dying in total indifference. But the real problem isn't the volume, it's profitability. Jaguar was losing money on almost every car. Their best-selling models, like the XC and the XF, were premium sedans stuck right in the middle of the most competitive market in the world, up against the 3 Series and the C-Class with crushed margins and zero decisive advantage. In the GLR group, Jaguar became the dead weight, while Land Rover, especially Range Rover, generated all the profit. Jaguar was losing money without generating any, costing its group just to survive. So speaking of Land Rover volume and profitability, you might say that Jaguar still made SUVs. And that's true, Jaguar didn't die because it missed the SUV wave. On the contrary, it actually caught it. The F-Pace in 2016, the I-Pace right after, and even the I-Pace, a fully electric SUV, launched as early as 2018, which was one of the very first premium electric SUVs on the market, before Audi, Mercedes and the others. And at first, it worked well. The famous record of 180,000 sales I mentioned to you comes largely from that. The F-Pace simply became the best-selling Jaguar in history, and the I-Pace was crowned World Car of the Year. Instead of building on that success, Jaguar let it slip away. Once the initial success was achieved in 2018, there was no renewal, no real second generation, and in the end, it resulted in a lineup that's just quietly aging, while the competition releases a new model every 18 months. The I-Pace, which was praised by the entire press, started selling in dribs and drabs, losing half its value at resale and costing a fortune to produce for tiny volumes. Because the F-Pace shared a platform with the Range Rover Velar, communication about this model was cautious, even restrained, to avoid cannibalizing the Range Rover that was making all the profits. So the problem isn't that Jaguar missed the SUV train. The problem is that they had the right products, but they built absolutely nothing on top of that. It peaked, then the lineup became outdated, and it also faced major reliability problems. People loved the idea of Jaguar, but ended up buying a Range Rover, Porsche, or one of the big three German brands instead. We love the brand, but no longer buy it, which is the worst case for a manufacturer. In 2023, it's clear and obvious. Jaguar is commercially dead. It's slowly fading away in silence. So to get out of this situation, continuing as before was not an option. And that's why they're going to come up with their completely crazy rebranding strategy. To renew a brand, starting by establishing a design direction with a concept car that gets people dreaming is a good idea. Everyone does it. That's what I explained to you recently in this video. If I were in Jaguar's place in 2024, that would also guide my strategy. This is when I bring out the pencil. Jaguar's decision to kill off all their models to be reborn in the ultra-luxury sector, with prices always above 100,000 euros in Bentley territory, or even Rolls-Royce territory, I think that was also a good idea. If you're selling little and losing money, you have to move upmarket for better margins, even if it means leaving the general public behind. Deliberately pricing out 85% of your historical customers to target the 15% who can truly afford it and generate real profits is tough to accept, but I believe it was the right call. Selling 8,000 high-profit cars is better than 60,000 cars that could bankrupt the company. So when Jaguar caused an uproar by presenting the Type 00, it might surprise you, but for me, the biggest problem isn't really the concept car. The provocative video ad reminded the whole world that Jaguar existed. But this shock strategy made people hate the concept, even though I don't think the Type 00 itself is disastrous. It has the proportion of a Grand GT, an endless hood, and a minimalist side that perfectly initiated the 180-degree stylistic shift. Without their strange communication campaign, I bet it would have appealed to more people. What also drew attention was the clear break from all of Jaguar's history. I'm not saying they should have made another regular XE, but Jaguar's strength is having strong design cues you can use even with a completely new look. I'll start my design using feline proportions and a cab rearward stance. It's one of the few design cues kept on the Type 00 because it's essential to the Jaguar myth. A long hood, a rear set cabin, low taut roofline, and the stance of a big cat ready to pounce. From the XK120 to the F-Type, including the E-Type and XJ sedans, this is the brand's main signature. On the concept car, though, the ready-to-pounce stance is missing, it's more massive and static. Then there's the oval grille, introduced on the XK120 and carried over to the Mark II and the E-Type, then reinterpreted in a wider, more modern mesh version. The more or less pronounced oval shape remains a common thread. There's also what's called the power bulge, the central bulge on the hood, which was spectacular on the E-Type, present on the XK, F-Type, XKR, and which hints at the engine underneath the hood and adds character to the front end. It was completely removed on the Type 00 concept, and that makes its styling much less feline than real Jaguars. There are many others like the Leaper and Growler emblems, the muscular rear haunches, on the Art line, a line from front fender to back. But the only other feature I want on my concept is the J-blade, a J-shaped light signature. It's a newer design element, but I find it strong and knew I had to use it while drawing. I also want my concept to be resolutely sporty, because for me, that's what makes up Jaguar's distinctive DNA. First of all, because it's the brand that made the XJ220 and the CX75 from James Bond. But also because of its position in the luxury English car market. If they release a car priced like a Bentley without offering something unique, Bentley customers will just stick with Bentley. Jaguar should embrace its role, as it has the historical legitimacy to be the sportiest English luxury brand. So I'm going for a concept that's sportier than the Type 00, with a strong attitude and pronounced fenders, combined with some aerodynamic elements, unlike what we saw on the Type 00. After considering several front-end options, I quickly took that design into Photoshop to visualize it more clearly. It was far from perfect, but it allowed me to send it to my Mammoth and test out different renderings. What's funny is that with the same sketch, I got 3 really different results. All 3 generally stuck to the idea, but I went with the GPT Images version, which wasn't perfect, but served as a base for me to rework in Photoshop and finalize the face of my sports concept that could have brought Jaguar back into the spotlight. When it comes to the engine, you know that personally, I prefer the charm of combustion engines. And I think for Jaguar, there might actually be an advantage in sticking with combustion at a time when the whole market is shifting toward electric. Because in its desire to become a much more elite brand aimed at far fewer customers, Jaguar decided to make a big pink electric car. If the goal isn't to sell many cars, there's no need to please everyone. And when you only want to convince a small niche of customers, you can afford to make a car with much more character and less crowd-pleasing. Maybe even keep combustion engines just because everyone else is leaving them behind. Aston Martin continues to sell combustion engine cars and even still offers manual gearboxes on certain models. So there may really be an opportunity to go against the current and do something that fewer and fewer manufacturers are offering. The long hood of the Type 00 is strange for a car that doesn't need space for a large combustion engine, so I've always found that inconsistent. For Jaguar, choosing a combustion engine makes sense. The brand could be exclusive because of its product, not just price and positioning. Create a spectacular sporty car for a smaller audience that values its uniqueness because no one else offers it. Ultimately, in its initial comeback phase, Jag could have launched a true sports car honoring its past glories while adding modern curves and a feline flair. So I used my Mammoth to compare a few video models and to be able to offer you some animated visuals. I hope you like it. Still, be careful with AI. If you're not very precise, it can completely change your design during the video, which looks a bit strange here. But anyway, the concept was only the first phase of the plan. Once the concept is set, you have to be able to translate that vision into a production vehicle that the end customer can buy. You have to consider major industrial constraints, which is why I find it tricky to propose a redesign later, since I'm not aware of all the constraints. By the way, it's a real headache for most designers. If we can't transpose the concept design into a road legal version, well, we just end up with a nice styling study that nobody can buy, so it doesn't translate into sales. However, if we tone down the result too much, it becomes a regular car that loses its appeal, making people think it's a shame. As a result, it won't generate sales because the production car will have lost its desirability. Making a sports concept helps revive the brand, because it's the easiest silhouette to produce. Overall, the proportions are good, and since my initial design wasn't too extreme, releasing a sports car like this in 2026 seems believable, especially given the current luxury market. I also quickly tested the idea of making a version closer to the F-Type, or switching from a long hood GT Coupe to a mid-engine sports car with the cabin much further forward while keeping the same design, or at least the same cues on the front end, but with a much more dynamic profile. Honestly, I think the result loses some of the elegance I associate with Jaguar. By the way, you may have noticed, I often place the car in environments that match what I have in mind when I think of the brand, so we are far from the Pink Planet and the weird costumes from their Copy Nothing commercial. Albeit, emphasizing elegance and England's classic castles and countryside might have once seemed outdated, but a love for timeless things is back in style and likely would have worked better for Jaguar. Checklist. Identify main ideas. Remove extra explanations. Keep warnings about AI design precision. Maintain original perspective. Ensure proper grammar. We could have offered a sedan, but for anyone inspired to try their own AI design after this video, be careful. If your request isn't precise, your results may be off or too generic. Anyway, as I explained in this video where I go over the complete strategy to transform a brand's design, using Opel as an example, once you have a good concept and a beautiful car to sell, derived from that concept that makes people dream, you have to manage to transfer this entire design language into the production models. Across all the models in the lineup, especially the ones where we're going to have higher sales volumes, like SUVs for example. This is a typical case that many of you know, and it has helped turn around quite a few brands, starting with Porsche and the Cayenne, Aston with its DBX, or even Bentley, which has the majestic Bentayga in its lineup, that now represents more than half of its sales. And the examples are really everywhere. Lamborghini, Genesis, everyone has gotten into it, starting from a simple observation. Supercars are nice, but they appeal to very few people, whereas an SUV with 5 real seats and a trunk targets a much larger group of customers. Even if it's not the model I'd buy, it makes a lot of sense for the brand economically. I grabbed my pencils and tablets to imagine how the Jaguar SUV, linked to the sports car and concept, might look with my design elements. The grille is implied but remains, with the lighting signature like the concept, though more horizontal. An SUV competing with Rolls in price must be as imposing as the Cullinan. And even if we change the proportions, we keep the width and the stance. But what really matters in this kind of car that will be sold at a very high price is the interior experience, which has to be on the same level as Rolls-Royce. Once again, by the way, the interior of the Type 01 that Jaguar just unveiled leaves me a bit puzzled. In the end, if you look at the sports car and the SUV side by side, it's clear they are not the same size, but you can see a family resemblance. Of course, you can keep expanding, like Bentley, which will soon do so with its new Torque, which will probably be a smaller SUV, Macan-sized. But for Jaguar, honestly, I wouldn't spread out too much. If the idea is to reach the level of Rolls-Royce, then I would stick to a very short and sportier lineup, like an ultra-prestigious coupe and an SUV, to make the perfect two-car solution. Now, I'd like to open up to current events. Even though it's not something I do often, but as I'm recording this, McLaren has just unveiled the MCL6 GT. You see the connection with Jaguar. It's a car that I find magnificent, and that draws from McLaren's heritage by following up on the M6 GT from 50 years ago without falling into neo-retro cliché. Additionally, it marks the return of the manual gearbox at McLaren, a rare feature that contrasts with current market trends. Where it could have worked with Jaguar is that they went for a simple design which really fits what car enthusiasts love, while completely breaking away from their current image. We're still a long way from a 720S in terms of design, and yet it works. So that's why it seemed obvious to me to talk to you about it now. McLaren is looking to its past to take a risk, finally, releasing a supercar with a manual gearbox in 2028 while completely changing the design. Said like that, it sounds like a bad idea. Jaguar, with its Type 00 and its Copy Nothing campaign, did exactly the opposite. Despite having the most exploitable heritage in the industry, with the E-Type, D-Type, EJ13 and XKSS, they asked the public to forget all that and chose to do something entirely different, abandoning everything that made them famous. And the ultimate irony is that Copy Nothing is a quote from William Lyons, the founder. So they went looking for a phrase in their history to justify erasing all their history. Knowing the M6 GT MC will launch around the same time as the Type 01. I'll let you guess which strategy will work better. I'm making my first video in this format, taking a design exercise from sketch to concept and expanding the lineup. So I'm not saying at all that my solution is the right one. Once again, I know the business too well for that. And I'm not going to go any further in this video because I don't know if you like it. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments if you want more exercises like this. I read everything as always. A quick note on AI, I used it in this video. If you want to imagine your own designs, be very specific with your prompts, or you'll end up with something generic that looks like 15 brands at once. To try Mammut AI, check the link in the description. I'll see you in my next video in early September with an exciting announcement. See you then, ciao!